In this video I'm going to show you how I create a font using CorelDRAW 2018. But first, before we actually start creating the font, I'll show you why I'm creating it to begin with. So I've got another program called Gerber Omega 5, and on my Mobile Studio Pro 16, which has a 4K screen on it, this is what it looks like. Toolbars are huge, my font drop down is I don't even know what to say. It's not good. But what I use this program for is mainly to open up files from other people in order to do design work for them, and then also I'll sometimes save back to their file format just because it's easier for me to do it than to explain how to do it on their end. So anyway, I'm going to take a font here, and I'll just do this freehand one, and I'll show you how I would make a font out of this, a true type font out of this. So Gerber fonts are called GSF fonts, and they actually have a true type to GSF converter, but they don't have a GSF to true type converter. Not sure why, but anyway. I also do monuments. I make headstones, and the way that we size things is pretty specific, whereas we'll go off of the size of a capital H, capital X, that kind of height for measuring our font, as opposed to measuring it off of ascenders and descenders and that sort of stuff. So I'm going to take this freehand font and type in 10 inches for how big I want it. And I'll just go ahead and click in the space here, and then I'll hit Control Shift and 6, and what that does is it loads up all of the characters in the font, and I'll double click to make this bigger. So then I'll click on the first glyph and just hit Control C to copy it, and then click again to get back to the list and do the same thing. So I'm clicking, Control C, click, click, Control C, click, click, Control C, click. And I'm not going to say that I'm doing that every time because that would get really annoying, but that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. So the reason that I'm doing this is because I want to be able to make sure that I can get every glyph that's in the font. You can see down below that there's some glyphs that I might not normally use, but I don't want to miss out on those in case I do need to use them. And I also found that I can't just copy and paste the stuff that I want, because if the glyph doesn't exist in the font, when I copy and paste, it throws an error that says, I don't remember what it says. All I know is that I can't copy and paste a set list of 256 characters, because if they don't exist, then I end up with an error and it doesn't work anyway. So this is the only way that I've come up with in order to get all the glyphs that I need and not get in and not have any errors come up. So the way that Gerber works is they've got a clipboard, but the clipboard is actually only for Gerber itself, or for Omega. Like, I can't copy and paste from Omega to CorelDRAW, for instance. So that's why I've got to do this and put it onto their clipboard first, and then we can go from there. I myself don't like software that is incredibly proprietary. It's not my favorite stuff to deal with, so that's one of the reasons that I use CorelDRAW, is that it's actually got a really open architecture. I can create my own macros and all sorts of good stuff there. So I think I've gotten everything, but we'll see. I should have done a screen print too. Maybe I still can without messing up their clipboard. We'll see what happens. So I just did Alt print screen to hopefully print that, and then I'll hit Control V and see what gets pasted, whether it's my print screen or whether it's the text. Come on, Control V. Well, alright, I should have done the print screen first. So we'll try that again. Let's go into CorelDRAW and we'll do a print. We'll paste the print screen first. So that pastes just fine. I don't know what it was doing in Omega. I guess it doesn't even. Anyway. Okay, so we'll go back to Control-Shift-6 and do this all over again. I'll cut the video out here though. Okay, I think I've got them all copied again to their clipboard, so I'm just going to hit Control-V to paste. And that seemed to work. So I'll hit spacebar, I think it is, to zoom to all. So now I've got all of those characters, or all the glyphs out of that font. So I'll go up to File, and I will say Export. Actually, I'm going to say Save As. And it'll go to my export folder. Under the Save As type, I'll do AIGSP and type in, I don't know, GSP freehand. And under options, there's a whole bunch of options, but I can't even see the options really because, I mean, anyway, it's so big, so I don't even know. Anyway, I'm just going to hit save. So that's saving that file. So back in CorelDRAW, I will go to Open and grab that AI file and open it up. And this is the way that it comes in. I'll go ahead and grab this and copy that too and paste it into this one. Okay, so the way that this comes in, it looks like it's all combined, all one thing. So the first thing I'll do is I'll grab it with my pick tool and I will break it apart, or hit Control K on the keyboard. And then I've got a macro that will then go back and recombine everything on a glyph level. So that's what I would do, is I'd go and run my macro. So I'm just going to say run macro, come to my list of macros here, and I've got one called test modules combine glyphs, and I'll run that. So what that does is it goes and finds anything so for instance for the D, it found the inside part of the D and it combined it with the outside part of the D so that it's one letter, but it didn't combine it with the E. So it just separated all the letters is what that macro did for me. The one thing that I don't have it set to do is things like this exclamation point. So I would need to grab both of those pieces and combine those together. So if there's anything that's separated, same thing with this. If I need both of those to be together, I would grab them both and hit combine. And I just don't have the macro set up to do that because I don't have to do it too often. So I'll just do this one and that one, and it takes a lot more logic to figure those out than it's worth the time to do. So anyway, so that's what I would do there. I'd also set up my page to be a web page and a 960 by 960 web page, just because it is a default size there. And I will go to view and say page border. Usually I don't view page borders when I do things, but I'm going to do it in this case. All of this stuff I'm going to move over to the side, and I'm going to hold Control while I do that so that it stays in line. Not that it probably really matters, but that's what I would do there. So what I want to do is I want to line up to make sure that my letters or my numbers are the right size. This box, 960 by 960, is going to end up being a 10-inch box. And if you remember right, we exported out as a 10-inch letter. So this should be a 10-inch letter, so it should fit in my box. Now I chose a font that actually you can't really tell very well whether or not that happened because the way that it curves and stuff above and below. So I'm just going to go with it that this is actually a 10-inch font, and it's already lined up, so I think we're good there. So all I would do is I'd take this over to the side, okay, and get it all set up that way. I don't really need that, I guess. So I'll zoom in here, and I will grab the first character that I want, and I'm going to go and open up my Align and Distribute Docker. It's in here somewhere. Align and Distribute. Here we go. So Align and Distribute, and we want to align to the page. So we're going to say page here, and we just want to align it to the center. So I made sure page was set, and then I'm aligning it to the center. And once I've got it aligned to the center of the page, I'm going to go to File and say Export. I'll just put it here. And under Save As Type, I'm going to change to TTF, which is True Type Font. So there we go. So I want to make sure that Selected Only is checked because I only want to do the one glyph, and I will hit Export. Now I need to give it a name. So since I already called it GSP Freehand, I'll just keep it that, GSP Freehand. It's not a symbol font, so I don't want that. My style is normal, grid size is fine, and I'll click OK. And yes, I do want to save. Now you have to choose a character to match it up with. So I'm going to grab my exclamation point here, which is character number 33, and I will click OK. Now if I wanted to make sure that I was on the right character, I could go back to our picture here, and you'll see the 33 matches up with that. So for some of these ones that aren't going to be, you know, real standard ones, we'd probably want to double check those numbers or make sure that we're putting them in the right area. But anyway, so that's what I would do, and then I'll just hit Control Z to get it back to where it was and go on to the next one. So I'll grab that one, hit Align Centers horizontally to the page, and then Control E to export. And I'm going to click on the same file this time now that it's been created and say Export and say Yes, because what it will do is it will overwrite the font, and I'll just go down to the next character here and just click OK. Control Z to undo, grab this one, and keep doing that. So I'm just going to do this for every single character that I've got in my list. Go all the way down until you get all the way across. For those special characters, I believe you can just type in the character number and have that match up with those. But I'll go ahead and pause the video while I do that, and if I run into problems, I'll start the recording again in just a little bit, but I'll go ahead and get through all these. I realized while I was doing the exporting before that I had missed the V and W, or W, two of the capital letters I had missed in my copy and pasting. So I've actually gone back and redone that, and now I'm back to the beginning again to start all over. And there was one other thing that I wanted to point out that I probably should have done to begin with, and that is, before we break everything apart, if we select all the nodes with our shape tool, just double click to select all those, so we'll see 3,561 nodes. I'm just going to come up here and say reduce nodes in order to get that down just a little bit cleaner, so that dropped 200 of those nodes off. Not that it's a big deal, but in case there are any duplicated nodes or anything, I wanted to get rid of those beforehand. So I'll do that, and then I'll break it apart and go back and run my my fill glyphs macro. And then I'll continue to do the same thing that I had done before. So I will redo my video once I get back to that point. I also wanted to show you a possible place where you might find an error, and that is, for instance, on these quotes. If I grab those, I have not combined these again since I restarted, so we've got one quote and another one. If I grabbed both of those, if I moved it to center, you're going to see how it turns into one quote, right? So you would obviously notice that there was something wrong there with quotes, but if it was this one, for instance, I'm going to break that apart and take those and move them to the middle. You can see how it stays on center, so you're not going to necessarily notice that there's going to be a problem until you go up to File and Export and put it into the font, and then you say, then it says too many objects to export, and that's because there's actually two pieces here. So we've got the top one and the bottom one. So you need to make sure that they're combined first before you export them out. I like to work with keyboard shortcuts to be faster, so I'm going to just show you the keyboard shortcuts that I use. So I would click on the letter, go ahead and align it, then hit Control E to export. Just hit Enter because I'm saving over the same name, and then just hit Y in order to do yes. And then I can choose the letter that I want and hit OK. And then Control Z undoes, and then I can start back over. So with C, click on that, Control E, hit Enter, hit Y, choose the C, and hit OK. Control Z, and redo that again. So just to speed up the process, I think that's a good way to do it. Sometimes I go ahead and just hit the letters anyway. But anyway, just to show you how I would speed things up with keyboard shortcuts. So the first one that I really ran into a problem with is this euro symbol. So when I export that one, the Gerber list has it set as character 128, but if I go to 128 and click OK, it says character code is not supported by Windows. So I'll have to see what's going on with that. But under the character block, instead of basic Latin, I found currency symbols, and there was a euro currency symbol there. It has it listed as 8364 though. So I'm just going to go with it for this one. I don't really use euros anyway, but that's what I'll do for that one. So on the cent sign for dollars and cents, and then this is the sign for Great British pounds, or pounds. I don't know if it's only Great British pounds, but anyway. Not under basic Latin, I found it under Latin 1 supplemental, and it was right here under 163. So I would have thought that that's where the euro would have been, because if you click on it, it says character number 128, but it's actually blank, so I'm not sure why it's not letting us do any of those ones there. Anyway, so 163 here for that is found under supplemental. Okay, so now that I've got all of the glyphs exported to the TTF, I'm going to use a program called TypeTool 3, and this is by FontLab. It's a really great program, and it's only like $48, so I would highly recommend TypeTool 3 if you need a good font editor. It's very simplistic. I had FontLab, or I have FontLab, but I found out that TypeTool 3 actually ends up doing everything that I needed to do for a much smaller price. So I can suggest this as far as what you would want to do. So if we go ahead and click on this and say open, it'll load up our font for us. And the first thing that I'll do is I'll go to Tools, Window, say New Metrics window, and make sure that I'm in metrics, and then I'll click on this little button here and do auto, and I will generate metrics for the whole entire font. This is where you can set how much space you want to be between your letters, and I'll just click OK. And what that will do is it will take all of our glyphs and add left and right bearings to them, so that if I go back into my previous window, so I'll close that here. If I double click on any one of these, it'll open it up, and you'll see that my left and my right bearings are equally distant from the ends of each of these. Whereas before, since I did auto before on exporting, it ended up that some of them, weren't quite centered or whatever. So I'm going to have FontLab do all that, or not FontLab, but TypeTool 3 do that for me. That's why I didn't care when I exported if auto was selected for the size of my thing. So I do metrics first, and then I do kerning, and same thing, I come in and click on this and say auto, and under this all pairs in the following list, but I want to do the extended pairs list, and click OK. And what this will do is it will actually create kerning pairs for me, so that as I type things, and there's a little down arrow here, I can type in a whole bunch of stuff and see kind of how things work. If I'm in the metrics window, I don't see kerning, so if I want to see kerning, I have to make sure that I'm in the in this kerning mode in order to see that. So I will usually just click on the very top one of these and see if there's anywhere that I need to change my kerning, if it's too much or too little. Same thing for the spacing. If I've got too much or too little spacing on my metrics, then I can change that as well. So if you click on it, you can see the numbers for how much space you got left to write. I think that there's too much space between the end of that and my M, so I would probably bring all of those in. So in a kerning window, I can click on this B, for instance, and drag it over to the left so that it's indented in a little bit. On this one, I can drag that one over, and so what that's doing is it's creating a kerning pair for me, and I can go through and kern this as much as I want to do. And there are things called classes for kerning. I've never actually messed with that before, but that's supposed to let you set it up so that similar glyphs can all be kerned the same way at the same time. I've never really messed with that. I'm definitely not a font expert. All I know is what I need to know in order to get it to work the way that I want it to. So anyway, that's kind of how I do this. I just go through and to whatever looks good to me. I'm just eyeballing it. I've got a couple dates set up in here that I've already typed in because I do headstones, so I typed in a whole bunch of dates just so that I can see, if maybe the A is too close to the J, or maybe the N needs to come closer. There's that sort of stuff. Like this one, I think that A is too close, and I think my space is actually too big, 2048, because that was the width of my whatever it was when I created the font. That was the width of our block, so I would actually bring that space down. I don't know what's proper, but something more like that. So you can see from the metrics to the kerning mode how that can change depending on my kerning pairs. So I will, when I'm doing my kerning, make sure that you're in your kerning mode in order to go through and set all of the kerning up. The thing with kerning is that if you set it once, you don't have to individually kern characters every time you're in your program. So the best thing is to do it one time, make it look right in here, and then when we're back in CorelDRAW, it's going to look right and we don't have to manually kern anything. So maybe on a 1 and a 1 I'll spread those out a little bit. But once again, this is just me eyeballing it as to what I think looks good. I don't know if there's actually any standards or if I'm doing things the wrong way. All I know is that I'm trying to make it look nice. So I'm setting up kerning pairs to do that, so that I don't have to individually kern every time I'm in my program. Alright, so that's how I do that, set up the kerning anyway, and I'm just pushing my up arrow in order to scroll through these different ones. So I'll click down here, click on the up arrow. I don't know that there'll ever be an H and an H together, but anyway. So I think the auto kerning actually brought those a little bit too close for my liking. So I'd bring them back out a little bit. And if I wanted to, I could type out some words. If I was trying to match the kerning and spacing of Gerber, I could go ahead and type out some words and stuff in there, so that when I am doing my spacing and my kerning, I can kind of match what that was. But I'm not being too particular for this particular font anyway on how that works. Okay, so I've got that all set up. Just for the sake of the video, I'm not going to do all of these, but when I've got everything set up the way that I want it to, I'll go up to File and Font Info, and then I'll type in the name of the font. I'm going to go ahead and go with GSP Freehand, just to make it easy. I click on this button, Build Names, and that will build all the names for me that I need it to build. Copyright information, I'll go ahead and say that it was created by me. The year is this year, and then you can say build copyright information. Under the notice description, I'm actually going to say that it was converted from Gerber Omega freehand font, just to say that it's not actually mine. I did not create it, I'm just creating the font file itself. I didn't create the font. I didn't create the glyphs anyway. Designer information, if you want to type all that in, you can. License information, this is to be used only. So I'm licensing this for myself because I'm making it for myself. I do not condone sharing fonts, or, you know, if you don't have Gerber, I'm not going to give you this font. I think it's okay for me to go ahead and do what I'm doing because I have Gerber, and it is you know, something that I'm licensed to use, and so I think that's perfectly fine. But I'm not going to call this my own, and because all I did was, you know, straight conversion. I didn't redraw anything. If I were to actually redraw a font and make it my own, then I would go ahead and create all this license information. But because in this video I used one that wasn't my own, I'm not going to say that it is. So I'll just call it version 1, and once again click this button so that it gives me an auto record. Same thing for all of these things. Created the font now, and the rest of this stuff I just keep the way that it is, and I say OK. Then we go back up to File and say Generate Font, and this time you can see I've already converted some other ones. I'm going to usually do an underscore version 1.0 because it's version 1.0. It's the first time I've ever made one, or made this one, and we'll go ahead and say save. Then from there, all we need to do is go to our font folder, and we'll load up the font here. Or we don't need to load it up, we'll just right click on the font and say install, and that will install it into Windows for us. And then we can go back into CorelDRAW, click, and come down here. We'll go to, I don't need to see the filters there, we'll just go to GSP Freehand, and now I can say this is the freehand font. I guess I didn't select freehand. I thought I had freehand. So this is the freehand font. And I can see that my kerning's not perfect here, so I'd go back in and, you know, fix all the kerning that I don't like, resave the font, save it as version 1.1, reinstall it, and come back and reuse it until I got the font perfectly back, you know, to the way that I wanted it to work. But the reason that we went with 10 inches here and on a 10-inch page, or 960 pixels, which at 96 dpi ends up being 10, is because in monuments we like it so that when we type in 1 inch here, it's actually 1 inch for the font size. And I realize with this font it's kind of hard to tell, but if I went back to just my legal size paper, and I'm just going to make a copy of this right next to this one and switch it back to a font that I know I've got the tops. I'll just do my MD Roman. So if we measure from here to here, you'll see how it lines up the way that it's supposed to line up. Whereas a non-monument font, or one that I haven't created, if I just pick any other font from Windows that hasn't been set up this way, you'll see in CorelDRAW anyway that that's not the way that it's sized. So the reason that I did what I did was so that it would be sized correctly, so that when I'm using it in CorelDRAW, it is set up so that 1 inch equals 1 inch. So hopefully that helps as far as creating your own font. Obviously I did not draw these glyphs. I already said that before. So if I were to create a font myself, I would want to draw all of the glyphs myself. And that way it would be my font instead of using something else. But anyway, hopefully that helps, and if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll go from there.